The night she laughed at me, it wasn't loud. That was the worst part. No cruel cackle. No pointing finger. Just a soft, disbelieving smile. The kind you give a child who says they're going to touch the moon someday. The kind that says you don't even understand how impossible you sound. We were 17, sitting on the hood of her father's old car, parked at the edge of the football field, the stadium lights humming behind us like a tired insect. Everyone else was inside, cheering for a game neither of us cared about. I skipped practice. She'd skipped cheer rehearsal. For once, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just us. I told her I was going to build something big. Not just successful. Not just comfortable. I said big. I said I wanted to build a company that would change how people lived. I said I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I couldn't stay in this town forever, and I knew I couldn't accept the small future everyone else seemed so comfortable with. She listened quietly, wrapped her arms around her knees, looked out at the field. Then she smiled. "Ethan," she said gently, "you're sweet, but you're not that guy." That was it. No insult. No shouting. Just that sentence. You're not that guy. She didn't mean to hurt me. I know that now. Back then, it felt like someone had reached into my chest and calmly switched something off. I asked her what she meant. She hesitated, then shrugged. "You're smart. You work hard. But people like us don't end up billionaires. That's for other people. Kids with connections. Or geniuses. Or luck. You should be realistic." Realistic. That word followed me for years like a shadow I couldn't outrun. We sat there in silence after that. The game ended. The crowd spilled out. She hopped off the hood, smiled again. Awkward this time, and said she had to go. I watched her walk away without stopping her. That was the last honest conversation we ever had. My town was the kind of place people described as quiet when they meant stuck. One main street, 2 diners, a closed factory everyone still talked about like it might reopen if they believed hard enough. The same families had lived there for generations, passing down houses, habits, and expectations like heirlooms. You graduated. You got a job, any job. You married someone you'd known since middle school. You complained about money, weather, and the people who left. And you stayed. I was good at school, but not extraordinary. No scholarships waiting for me. No rich uncle. My father worked maintenance at the high school. My mother cleaned houses. They were good people. Tired people. They loved me, but they loved stability more. When I told them I wanted to leave for college out of state, my dad stared at his plate for a long time before saying, "That's expensive." When I told them I wanted to study computer science instead of accounting, my mom asked, "Is that safe?" Everything came back to safety. I didn't blame them. Fear was the currency of this town. But after that night on the football field, something inside me hardened. Not into anger, at least not at first, but into resolve. A quiet, relentless resolve that felt almost frightening in its steadiness. If I wasn't that guy, then I would become him. Not to prove her wrong. That's what I told myself, anyway. But deep down, I carried that smile with me everywhere. That soft dismissal. That certainty that my dreams were adorable, and nothing more. I left town 6 months later with 2 suitcases and a bus ticket. No one threw me a going-away party. College was not the cinematic escape I'd imagined. It was cramped dorm rooms that smelled like sweat and instant noodles. It was lectures where half the room already seemed smarter than me. It was part-time jobs that left my hands aching and my brain foggy when I tried to study afterward. I wasn't exceptional. That truth hit hard. There were kids who coded like they breathed, who talked about startups and venture capital like they'd been born fluent in it, who wore confidence the way others wore hoodies. I worked harder than all of them. I studied until my eyes burned. I taught myself skills that weren't on the syllabus. I failed classes and retook them. I built terrible projects and rebuilt them from scratch. While others partied, I sat alone in the computer lab, chasing ideas that didn't quite work yet. Obsession crept in quietly. First, it felt noble. Then it felt necessary. Then it felt like the only thing holding me together. I didn't go home for holidays. I told my parents I was busy. that I needed the time, that it was cheaper to stay. All true. None complete. What I couldn't explain was the fear that if I went back, even for a week, the town would swallow me whole. That its gravity would pull me back into the life I was trying so desperately to escape. I kept my head down. Years blurred together. By my final year, I had something resembling confidence. Not because I believed I was brilliant, but because I knew I could outwork almost anyone. That's when I met Marcus. He sat next to me in an entrepreneurship elective I'd taken on a whim. Loud, sharp, the kind of guy who asked questions professors didn't like because they exposed flaws in their slides. He noticed me because I corrected him once, quietly, politely, when he misunderstood a technical detail. Instead of getting defensive, he grinned. "You build things," he said after class. "Not a question." "Trying to," I replied. We started talking, then working together, then arguing, then building. Marcus had vision. Big, reckless vision. I had patience, structure, the ability to grind an idea into something usable. Together, we were dangerous. Our first project failed. Spectacularly. We lost a small amount of money and a large amount of pride. Our second project limped along before collapsing under its own complexity. The third one survived. Barely. It wasn't revolutionary. Not yet. But it solved a real problem for a niche market. We launched quietly. We expected nothing. Then users kept coming. Slowly at first. Then faster. I slept under my desk some nights. I stopped counting hours. My life shrank to code, feedback, iteration, repeat. When something broke, I fixed it. When users complained, I listened. When investors ignored us, I learned why. Money came later, much later. By the time it did, I was too exhausted to celebrate. The first time I saw my name in a business article, I didn't recognize myself. It was a small publication, a throwaway piece about emerging founders to watch. My photo looked stiff, my smile unfamiliar. I sent the link to my parents. My mom called me crying. My dad cleared his throat a lot. "I always knew you'd do something," he said. That wasn't true. But I let him have it. I didn't send it to her. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Not since she'd started dating someone else our senior year. Not since she'd stayed, and I'd left. I told myself she didn't matter anymore. That was also not true. Success, real success, didn't arrive all at once. Crept. Our company grew. We pivoted. We expanded. We failed forward. The product evolved into something larger than we'd ever planned. Investors stopped ignoring us. Then they started calling. Then they started competing for access. I learned how to sit in rooms with people who measured worth in commas. I learned how to speak carefully, how to hide fear behind data, how to negotiate without flinching. I learned that money didn't make things simpler. It made them louder. Years passed. The numbers grew absurd. Valuations climbed into territory I'd once joked about to cope with how unreachable it seemed. At some point, a lawyer sat me down and explained, very calmly, that on paper my net worth had crossed a threshold most people would never even approach. Billionaire. The word felt fake in my mouth, like a costume I wasn't sure I was allowed to wear. I didn't celebrate. I went back to work. But something else stirred. A thought I hadn't allowed myself to finish for years finally completed itself. I could go back. Not to stay. Never to stay. But to be seen. The invitation arrived in my inbox on a Tuesday afternoon. East Ridge High, 15-year alumni homecoming event. I almost deleted it. Then I saw her name on the guest list. She was organizing it. Of course she was. She'd always been good at bringing people together. Good at staying. Good at fitting into the life that had rejected me the moment I dared to want more. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. This wasn't part of my plan. I didn't have a plan. I'd never imagined this moment would present itself so cleanly, so casually, like an old door left unlocked. Marcus laughed when I told him. "Don't tell me you're actually thinking about going," he said. "I don't know," I replied. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You should. Not for revenge. For closure." I wasn't sure there was a difference. I didn't announce anything. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell the town I was coming back. I booked a flight, rented a car, packed lightly. As the plane descended, I saw the patchwork fields, the same roads, the same water tower with the town's name painted on it in fading blue letters. Nothing had changed, except me. The rental car hummed along streets I could navigate blindfolded. My childhood home looked smaller than I remembered. The high school parking lot was freshly paved, but the building itself was the same brick box filled with echoes. I sat in the car for a long time before getting out. I wasn't nervous. I was bracing. Inside, the gym had been transformed with cheap decorations and nostalgic playlists. People clustered in familiar groups, wearing better clothes but the same expressions. Laughter bounced off the walls. I blended in at first. No one recognized me immediately. I'd grown a little older, a little leaner. Confidence changes posture. Money changes tailoring. Then whispers started. A name passed from mouth to mouth. A phone screen turned my way. Eyes widened. And then she saw me. Her smile froze, not cruel this time, but stunned. Genuine. She walked toward me slowly, as if afraid I might vanish if she moved too fast. "Ethan?" she said.
Iraplia.
For a moment, neither of us spoke. The girl who had once told me I wasn't that guy stood in front of me, searching my face for confirmation of a reality she'd only seen through headlines and rumors. "You came back," she finally said. I nodded. "Just visiting." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I can't believe it. You actually—" She stopped herself. I finished the sentence in my mind. "You actually did it." But she didn't say it out loud. Not yet. And that was when I realized something important. This wasn't the moment. The real reckoning hadn't even begun. She recovered quickly. That had always been her strength. "Well," she said, smoothing her hair and smiling like a host again. "Welcome home. Everyone's been talking about you." "I'm sure," I replied. There was no bitterness in my voice, just fact. She gestured toward the gym floor, where clusters of former classmates hovered around high tables. "You should come say hi. People would love to see you." I glanced around. Faces I half remembered. People who'd once known me as the quiet kid who fixed computers, the scholarship long shot, the guy with unrealistic dreams. "Maybe in a bit," I said. She nodded, a flicker of something unreadable passing through her eyes. Disappointment? Relief? Couldn't tell. "So," she said instead, "how long are you in town?" "Just a few days." "Staying with your parents?"
No.
"Hotel." "Oh." She hesitated. "We should catch up. Properly. There's a coffee place downtown now. Actually, two." I smiled faintly. "That's progress." She laughed, a little too quickly. "Tomorrow? If you're free." I considered it. Every instinct told me this was dangerous territory. But another part of me, the one that had boarded a bus years ago with nothing but resolve, knew I hadn't come all this way to avoid discomfort. "Sure," I said. "Tomorrow." Her shoulders relaxed. "Great." She excused herself to greet someone else, leaving me alone with the hum of music and the low buzz of conversation. Within minutes, people began approaching me. Some cautiously, some eagerly. Old acquaintances suddenly warm, suddenly curious. "Man, we heard you're killing it. Did you really start that company? Is it true you're?" I answered politely, vaguely. I didn't correct exaggerations or confirm numbers. I watched how quickly respect replaced indifference, how success rewrote memories. A guy who'd once mocked my thrift store clothes now asked for advice about investing. A girl who'd ignored me for 4 years laughed at jokes I barely told. It wasn't satisfying. It was hollow. By the time I left, my chest felt tight. Not with pride, but with a strange grief for the boy who'd needed their approval so badly and never got it. Outside, the night air was cool. I sat in my car and stared at the school one last time before driving away. Tomorrow would be harder. The coffee shop was bright and minimalist, trying very hard not to look like it belonged in this town. Exposed brick, succulents, handwritten menu boards. She was already there when I arrived, seated by the window. She stood when she saw me, smiling, this time with something closer to nervousness. You look different, she said. So do you. It was true. She'd changed, but not in the way I had. Her confidence was polished by familiarity, not struggle. She wore the town well. We ordered. Saturday. An awkward pause settled between us. I followed your story, she said finally. Not closely, but I saw things. Articles. Interviews. And, she exhaled.
I'm impressed.
Honestly, there it was. The validation I'd once craved. It didn't land the way I'd imagined. Thanks, I said. She studied me. Can I ask you something? You just did. She smiled weakly. Do you ever think about back then? All the time, I answered before I could stop myself. Her eyes widened slightly. Really? Yes. She looked down at her cup. I think about it too. About you. About what I said. I stayed quiet. I didn't mean to hurt you, she continued. I was scared. Everyone was. Leaving felt impossible. I know. You don't sound angry. I'm not, I said, then corrected myself. Not anymore. She nodded, absorbing that. I stayed, she said softly. I married. Divorced. I work at the community center now. It's fine. Fine. The most dangerous word in the language. I'm glad you're happy, I said. She met my gaze. Are you? The question surprised me. I don't know, I admitted.
I'm fulfilled.
Busy. Driven. But happiness is complicated. She smiled sadly. I figured. We talked for hours. About our lives. Our parents. Mutual friends. The town. The world beyond it. There was chemistry still, familiar, easy. But also distance. Too much history. Too many diverging paths. At one point, she leaned back and laughed softly. You know, I always thought if you ever came back, it would be for revenge. I raised an eyebrow. Is that what this feels like? She considered it.
No.
It feels like closure. Good, I thought, because that's what I needed too. As we stood to leave, she hesitated. There's a fundraiser tomorrow night for the old factory redevelopment project. Most of the town will be there. I heard about that, I said. Big plans. She nodded. You should come. I knew what she was really saying. They should see you. I'll think about it, I replied. That night, I lay awake in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling. I hadn't come back to humiliate anyone. That story was too simple, too petty. But I also hadn't come back purely for peace. There was something unfinished here, a weight I'd carried for 15 years that still pressed against my ribs. The fundraiser would be the final act, whether I liked it or not. The old factory loomed at the edge of town like a skeleton. Once the heart of the local economy. Now a rusted reminder of promises broken. They'd cleaned part of it up for the event. Lights strung across steel beams. Folding tables dressed in white cloth. A small stage at one end. I arrived quietly, dressed simply.
No entourage. No announcement.
But word spread fast. Whispers followed me through the space like ripples in water. People stared openly now. Phones came out. Conversations stalled mid-sentence. The mayor spotted me and nearly tripped over himself rushing over. Ethan, what a surprise. We're honored. I'm just here to support, I said. Well, he said, grinning too wide. Support is exactly what we need. I smiled politely. The event progressed. Speeches were made. Numbers were floated. Dreams were sold. They talked about revitalization, about jobs, about the future. And then, unexpectedly, my name was called. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor said, voice booming. We have a hometown success story with us tonight. Someone who proves that big dreams can come from small places. Ethan Walker. Applause erupted. Thunderous. Overwhelming. I froze. This wasn't planned. All eyes turned toward me, including hers. I stood slowly, walked to the stage on legs that felt oddly steady. The microphone hummed as I adjusted it. I hadn't prepared a speech, but I knew exactly what to say. I didn't expect this. I began, and laughter rippled through the crowd. I left this town because I didn't think I fit here anymore, because I had dreams that didn't make sense to anyone, including me. Silence fell. I failed more times than I can count. I doubted myself constantly, and there were moments when giving up would have been easier than pushing forward. I paused, scanning the faces. But here's what I learned, I continued. Success isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving yourself right. I took a breath. This town taught me how to work, how to endure, even how to be underestimated. And that has value. Murmurs of agreement. So tonight, I said, I'd like to contribute. Gasps followed as I named a number, one that dwarfed the fundraiser's entire goal. People stood, cheered, some cried. I stepped down from the stage feeling strangely light. She found me afterward, eyes shining. You didn't have to do that, she said. I wanted to, I replied, and I meant it. For the first time, the weight lifted, or so I thought. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, she walked with me toward the parking lot. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. Thank you. She stopped, turning to face me. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd believed in you back then? I met her gaze. Sometimes. And then I realize, I said gently, that if you had, I might not be who I am now. Her eyes filled, but she smiled. I guess that's fair. We stood there, the past and present colliding softly between us. I'm glad you came back, she said. So am I. As I drove away, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about what came next. And I had no idea how unexpected that next chapter would be. I thought leaving town again would feel easy. Didn't. The morning after the fundraiser, I woke before my alarm, the gray light slipping through the hotel curtains like a quiet accusation. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Emails, messages, deals moving forward without me. The world I'd built waiting patiently for my attention. For the first time in years, I let it wait. I showered slowly, dressed without checking the mirror too much, drove aimlessly through streets that no longer felt like enemies, just old acquaintances I'd finally stopped arguing with. I parked near the river where we used to hang out as kids. The water was low, moving lazily over rocks etched smooth by time. I sat on the hood of my car and watched it flow, thinking about how much energy I'd spent fighting the current, and how little time I'd spent asking where it was actually taking me. My phone rang. Her name. I stared at it longer than necessary before answering. Hey, I said. Hey, she replied. I wasn't sure if I should call. You should. A pause. Then, can we talk?
I'm listening.
No, I mean, in person. I closed my eyes briefly. Where? My place, she said. If that's okay. It surprised me how calm I felt as I agreed. Her house was small, neat, and filled with sunlight. Plants on the windowsills. Books stacked in uneven piles. The life of someone who'd learned how to make peace with limits. She poured coffee. We sat at her kitchen table. I didn't sleep, she said. I kept replaying everything. Last night. The past. Me too. She took a breath. I owe you something. Not an apology. I already gave you that. I owe you honesty. I waited. When you left, she said, I told myself you'd be back in a year. Broke. Humbled. I told myself your dreams would shrink to fit this place again. She winced. That sounds awful out loud. It's honest, I said. Keep going. When you didn't come back, she continued, I felt stupid, not because you succeeded, but because I'd been so sure I understood how the world worked. And you broke that belief. She looked at me then, really looked. Part of me resented you for it. I nodded slowly. I resented you too. For a long time. I know. Silence settled, heavy but not hostile. Do you ever think, she asked, that we might have ruined something that could have been good? Yes, I said. But I also think we might have saved ourselves from something that would have been small. She smiled faintly. You always did see both sides. She leaned back, exhaling. Here's the part I'm scared to say. Seeing you last night didn't make me feel regret. It made me feel hope. Not about us. About possibility. About the idea that life doesn't lock you into one version of yourself forever. I studied her face. The sincerity. The courage it took to admit that. I'm glad, I said. That matters more than you think. She swallowed. There's something else. I raised an eyebrow. The redevelopment project, she said. It's fragile. Politics, egos, short-term thinking. Your donation will help, but money alone won't fix it. I know. She hesitated. Would you consider advising? Not running it, just guiding, helping us not mess it up. The question landed softly, but its implications were enormous. I'd built my life on motion, on forward momentum, on never looking back long enough for nostalgia to catch me. But this wasn't about going backward. It was about closing a loop. I can't stay, I said carefully, but I could help from a distance. Relief washed over her face. That would mean everything. I smiled. Then I'm in. I left town 2 days later. This time, I didn't feel like I was escaping. Back in the city, life roared back to full volume. Meetings, strategy sessions, expansion plans. The machine hummed, relentless and demanding. But something in me had shifted. I stopped working until exhaustion felt like virtue. I started delegating without guilt. I took weekends. I slept. Marcus noticed immediately. You're different, he said one evening over drinks. In a good way. Slightly alarming, but good. I went home, I said. He raised his glass. And survived. Barely. We laughed. Months passed. The factory project progressed. Slowly, carefully. I joined calls, reviewed plans, asked uncomfortable questions, forced long-term thinking where short-term applause would have been easier. The town didn't turn into a miracle success story overnight, but it moved, and that mattered. She and I stayed in touch. Messages at first, then calls. Long ones, comfortable ones. There was no tension. No risaldache. Just two people who'd finally met each other as they truly were. One night, during a call that stretched past midnight, she said, "Do you ever get lonely?" "Yes," I replied honestly. "Me too." We didn't say anything else for a while. Then she laughed softly. "Life's weird. It really is." The acquisition offer came out of nowhere. A tech giant. Numbers so large they barely registered as real. Control relinquished. Legacy secured. I stared at the proposal for a long time before calling Marcus. "This changes everything," he said. "It does," I agreed. He hesitated. "Do you want it?" That was the question, wasn't it? I thought of the boy on the football field. The hunger, the anger, the drive. Then I thought of the man by the river. The quiet, the clarity. "Yes," I said finally. "But on my terms." Negotiations took months. Lawyers circled. Clauses were rewritten. Futures reshaped. When it was done, when the ink dried and the press releases went live, the word billionaire followed my name everywhere like a headline that refused to fade. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. I went back to the town one last time before winter. This time there was no event. No crowd. No stage. Just her. We walked along the river as leaves fell around us. The air sharp and clean. "You look lighter," she said. "I am." She smiled. "What's next for you?" I thought about it. I want to build things that matter. Support things that last. Maybe teach. Maybe disappear for a while. She nudged me with her shoulder. "That sounds like happiness." "Maybe," I said. "What about you?" "I'm thinking about leaving," she admitted. "Not forever. Just seeing more." The admission warmed me more than I expected. "I think you should," I said. "You'd be great out there." She stopped walking, turning to face me. "You know, when I laughed back then, it wasn't because I thought you were incapable." "I know," I said gently. "It was because I was afraid to believe someone like you could exist. Someone who actually followed through." I smiled. "I almost didn't." "But you did," she said. And that changed me too. We stood there, the river whispering beside us. This is goodbye, she said. For now, I replied. She hugged me, tight, honest. No regrets, no longing, just gratitude. On the flight home, I watched the town disappear beneath the clouds. I thought about revenge, how intoxicating it had once seemed, how empty it felt compared to this quiet, earned peace. The real victory hadn't been returning as a billionaire. It had been returning as someone whole, someone who no longer needed laughter to turn into fuel, someone who had learned that success wasn't about proving others wrong, but about finally believing yourself enough to move forward anyway. If the story stayed with you, if it reminded you that your beginnings don't get to decide your ending, then stay close. Subscribe for more stories about growth, resilience, and the unexpected ways life rewards those who refuse to give up on themselves.